Hi guys! So as promised, the next video in the Tarot of the Gods series is going to be a video on Ganesha. You also will see and hear his name pronounced Ganesh, but as far as I can make out, well, I haven't exactly come to a conclusive answer on that question, so I won't go into it too much, but I always use the term Ganesha because that is how he was made known to me. It is the pronunciation and the spelling that I come across most often, and it's just what I have run with. So first and foremost, I want to say that despite the fact that Ganesha is one of the most important deities in my practice, I feel as though I have a pretty shamefully low amount of, a small amount of actual concrete knowledge about him and his mythologies. I won't say that I haven't read anything about him, because obviously I have, but it's definitely been limited. My time has been limited. My focus has been on the Morrigan for many months now. And generally speaking, if I am turning to the myths, if I am reading stories, it'll generally be Irish stuff that is related to the Morrigan or other deities, Irish figures who are maybe similar to her and things like that. So that's where my focus has been for a while now. That's kind of organically how it's been. And unfortunately I haven't had as much time to read about Hinduism or about Ganesha or any of the myriad Hindu gods that fascinate me. I am utterly fascinated by Hinduism and by the mythology and all of that stuff. So I am hoping, well, I was going to get stuck into the Norse mythology next, but I might actually look at Hinduism first. I'm not sure. I just need to find the time and make the time. I'm sure you all understand when I say that you know, you just, when it's not something that is specifically related to work or a project, and when it's to do with my own personal spirituality, it can be difficult to find the time. But all that being said, I will say that I think sometimes people can underestimate how much they actually have read about a certain topic and how much they actually do know. And this will manifest it often in people feeling as though they've had a sort of almost like a divine revelation about a certain deity, because they have a dream or they have a vision about a deity, and maybe they get a name or an image and symbols, and then when they go and look it up, it turns out that there is actually a myth or a deity with this name or with these associations, or, you know, Odin does actually have the associations that they dreamt about or thought that they did. I think sometimes there might be an element of a sort of intuitive linking. There might be, I mean, obviously this is where Jung's theory of a collective unconscious comes from, is this tendency of similar myths, similar symbols and similar deities and figures to spring up in different cultures and in places where people have not actually had any contact. But I think a lot of the time, and most of the time I would suspect, it's actually that you have read about them or you've heard about them and you've just forgotten. The unconscious mind is a wealth of information, a wealth of all sorts of stuff going on in there, and when you think about the size of your brain and how much we understand about it, and even the parts of the brain that we don't understand what they do, it's an amazing tool that our conscious mind is only a very, very small part of. And I tend to assume when that happens to me that I just already did read something or hear something, or you pick up a lot as you go through life, particularly if you're in any way curious, and in any way a curious person, and you tend to pick up books or you tend to look things up online. I would say that this tendency is even greater now with the internet, because we can Google things and everything is so fast. We're getting all this information really quickly. We're moving from page to page, and I think, you know, we pick up a huge amount of information that we then, a lot of it we will forget about again, but it is in there. So I have found that when I initially came to Ganesha, I felt like I'd read nothing about him. I mean, practically nothing apart from maybe his Wikipedia page. But my experiences of him have turned out to be in line with everything that I have read subsequent to my initial experience with them, if you see what I mean. So I would suspect that I have actually picked up more about him over the years than I thought I did. Anyway, that's enough rambling on that. I'm going to get started. Anything I want to say about him first? He is generally associated with obstacles. That's kind of the main association that most people will have with Ganesha. I'm not altogether certain if this is the case in India. It seems to me that he is maybe a little bit more diverse in his original in his original culture. He has a different kind of associations, but the idea of him as being a remover of obstacles has translated, really has moved across the world. He's become a very popular deity, not only in India but in other Hindu countries, and indeed in Western society, where people have become interested in Eastern religions and mythology and stuff like that. So this notion of him being a remover of obstacles was kind of my starting point. That was where that was how I kind of came up against him. But often he will be referred to as being the master of obstacles. Sorry, I was just double checking my camera is still on. It likes to turn off sometimes. He will often be referred to as being the master of obstacles. And I think it's important to remember that, yeah, he not only removes obstacles, but he can place them as well. I think that's something important to bear in mind, and I will get to that in a moment. So, without further ado, that has been a ridiculously long introduction, I'm aware of that, sorry. The first card that I have chosen for him is the Wheel of Fortune. So, there are various different reasons why I feel this card is particularly significant for Ganesha. First of all, it's that feeling that he is quite a diverse deity, that he has quite a lot of different associations. He has a lot of different names. And I feel as though the Wheel of Fortune sums up that kind of multifaceted kind of feeling. This is a card that comes up for me a lot when I am addressing a situation in which somebody is feeling quite scattered, or as though they have a lot of different responsibilities, a lot of different facets to themselves, and that there's just a lot going on, that there's just a lot of different components to a situation, or different things that need to be taken into consideration. And the Wheel of Fortune can either suggest that those things are scattered, or that they're not coming together, that things are feeling fragmented, and that they need to be let loose and let do their thing, so that they can actually come into balance. But in this situation, I feel the Wheel of Fortune it's demonstrating how Ganesha, while he has a lot of different associations and a lot of different things going on, these things do sort of come together into a coherent whole. The wheel is always turning. He is multifaceted. He has lots of different faces and names, and that is always changing and moving. But he is, I suppose a turning wheel has a core that does not move at the very center. The very central point won't be moving. The rest of the wheel is moving around it. And that's very important for me in my consideration of Ganesha. Also, he is largely associated with beginnings. When you think about removing obstacles, you can see where the connection comes in there with sort of beginnings and new things and opening up doors and things like that. And the Wheel of Fortune obviously is hugely important for that kind of thing as well, because it signifies how things need to change and move so that new things can come into being. When something new comes into being, something old falls out of being. And so the cycle continues. I have often experienced in Ganesha that he exudes a sort of energetic joy, and I love associating this with the Wheel of Fortune, because the Wheel of Fortune is all about change, that nothing stays still, and finding joy in that, finding our bliss in that, because ultimately we have to. Our life is change. Life is change. We can't exist without it. We can't be alive without it. We must die so that others can be born, and so on. And so the Wheel of Fortune is hugely important for that sort of energetic joy. The second card I've chosen for him is quite different, and it is the Hierophant. I had quite a lot of difficulty choosing cards for Ganesha, again because there were so many different ones that I could have chosen. And I wasn't expecting that with deities that I'm not as familiar with, say as the Morrigan and Gaia, but I definitely experienced that with him. So it was kind of between the Hermit and the Hierophant for me, but in the end I went with the Hierophant. The Ganesha is strongly associated also with basically everything that we would associate with the element of air. So intellect, learning, wisdom, writing, communication, all of that kind of stuff is generally associated with Ganesha. Things like the arts and literature and science and stuff like that. So very sort of kind of conscious mind, ego-based, yeah, sort of intellect based kind of stuff. And obviously there are a lot of cards that I could choose to represent this aspect of him, but the Hierophant worked for me because it taps into other aspects of Ganesha as well. The Hierophant is obviously a card of very traditional sort of learning, and I like this association with Ganesha because he feels to me as though the aspect of intellect and learning and writing that he dominates is that very sort of traditional passed down lore and wisdom, and yeah, very traditional sort of feel, a very inherited kind of feel, which I definitely get with the Hierophant. But what I also like about the Hierophant is that there is this feeling of that he is a doorkeeper. He is very often depicted as with a key somewhere in the card. He has this key to knowledge, and often people will think the Hierophant, you know, he's sort of withholding that key to knowledge or wisdom, that he's holding himself up on a pedestal and holding on to that key and insisting that everybody goes through him for that intellect. But I like to see him as being potentially more open and potentially allowing people to come to him and access that wisdom, access that portal through him, as opposed to holding people off from it. So yeah, I very much associate Ganesha with being a doorkeeper, a gatekeeper. Very much ties into his association with removing obstacles or placing obstacles. When you remove an obstacle, a door opens, and he has frequently appeared to me holding a key. So this association with the Hierophant started quite early on for me, very definitely. And it's kind of changed my relationship with this card as well. I have an interesting relationship with the Hierophant because I originally started learning tarot with the Shadowscapes deck, and that Hierophant card is very, very different. It's sort of an old tree, quite like an Ent. And there isn't that feeling of restriction or elevating himself over others. So the Rider Waite deck, I could see why people had a bad association with them, but I originally just kind of associated all the things I'd had with the Shadowscapes deck with the Rider Waite deck, and couldn't quite wiggle my way into being comfortable with the card. But my relationship with Ganesha has actually really opened up more possibilities with the Hierophant card for me. I definitely will sometimes read into this card that we're talking about something that is restrictive, or someone that is elevating themselves or holding themselves higher than others, or being overly traditional or overly conservative or whatever. But I feel like associating this card with Ganesha, it lightens it. It also, it very definitely taps into the deep kind of serious reverence side of Ganesha, but associating these two together definitely lightens the Hierophant card and makes it seem like a card of potential. And like there's a potential for initiation, that the secrets that the Hierophant is holding on to, that they are there for the taking. When it came to the minor arcana, I had quite a lot of different cards that I was choosing from, and a lot of sixes. I felt that Ganesha was connected to the sixes in a major way. I didn't actually end up choosing any of them, but I was seriously considering particularly the Six of Wands and the Six of Swords. It's interesting because the sixes I have often felt are very different from each other in the pips, but yeah, I'm not going to go into that too much now, but I might at some point talk about that because I haven't actually sat down to think about it. I haven't taken out all the sixes and looked at them and considered how they relate to Ganesha, but that's something worth thinking about. What I did choose in the end was the Three of Swords. This might seem like a strange card to choose. It might seem like a strange card to want to associate with the deity that you're working with, but bear with me. First of all, I did want to choose a sword card because a card from the Suit of Swords, because I associate Ganesha very much with that element of air. And also because the swords are, sometimes I feel as though the Suit of Swords has two different components to it. And I can see how those two components come together. But in some ways they actually remain separate for me. We have the component where it's about intellect, the mind, communication, and then we have the part where it's about conflict. The way that comes together for me is that I think of the phrase will, your will, and following your will and that kind of thing. And that your will arises from your conscious mind, it arises from your ego, it arises from your intellect. So you've got that air association, and then that conflict happens when your will is being imposed on others, when two people's wills are clashing, things like that. So the Three of Swords for me is about kind of two different things in relation to Ganesha. So I mentioned before that while he is kind of commonly or popularly associated with being a remover of obstacles, he can also place them. And to me, the Three of Swords represents his potential to place an object in order to make you grow, or place an obstacle in order to challenge you, in order to make you think differently, in order to make you sort of grow as you push through that challenge, as you have to push through that obstacle. So the Three of Swords to me is about, it's about reaching a fork in the roads and having an obstacle before you that you have to pass through. But equally, this card makes me think of him removing obstacles as well, because the heart being pierced with the Three Swords, it's sort of the ultimate removal of obstacles. And they are removed now because you have to deal with them, because the worst has happened, or you have been betrayed, or you have been hurt, or there has been that clash of wills. It's happened now. And the path is clear once you can move forward from this moment of difficulty, this moment of clashing, this unpleasant point at the crossroads or at the fork of the road, and then you can move forward, and you have to choose a path to take at this point. And that's another kind of association with the idea of removing obstacles. Like, sure, the obstacle can be removed and the path can be made clear, but once, when all paths are cleared for you and when everything is laid out before you, you have to make a choice. It's very unlikely that there's just going to be one simple, straightforward path laid out in front of you. You are actually going to have to make decisions and think about what it is that you really want. I think sometimes when we have obstacles placed in front of us, and when we don't work to remove those obstacles in our lives, we can kind of use them as excuses to get pushed and pulled in certain ways. We can use them as a reason, I can't do that, so I'll have to do this. And in a way, we like this because it limits our choices, it limits our options, and humans don't actually really like having a lot of choice. It's actually quite stressful for us. So it can be easier to sort of just accept an obstacle and to, go around it and just take the easy road. And when all the obstacles are removed, when all the paths are cleared, when everything becomes free, when you actually embrace your freedom and your personal power, and open all those doors, that can be quite a terrifying moment, because you have to actually make a choice. And once you start going down any one of those roads, you can feel as though you might not be able to turn back. You might not be able to get onto one of those other roads that you might have been on, which feels a lot more scary when they were options at some point. If you're going down a certain road and you think, that other road was never possible for me anyway, we don't experience the same level of regret. But once we start making our own choices, our own decisions, and moving down paths on our own volition, we have to take a certain amount of responsibility for those choices, and we have to make peace with that and be able to make decisions and choices without feeling as though we're just going to berate ourselves later down the road if we feel like we made the wrong choice. So there's a lot of meat on the bone with the Three of Swords and Ganesha, and this card really starts to get to the heart of what he has taught me, what I've been able to learn from him, and it's all quite convoluted, I suppose, but all the more rewarding for it. So lastly, I chose a court card, and I went with the Knight of Pentacles. I had originally thought about the King of Pentacles, and it just seemed wrong. It seemed that Ganesha should be a knight. He has that moving, changing energy about him, that sort of active, courageous kind of force about him that the knights have. And the Knight of Pentacles is sort of, yes, I chose the suit of Pentacles because of Ganesha's very sort of pragmatic associations. pragmatic isn't really the word I want. His kind of mundane physical kind of associations with, he's often honoured when people are starting a business or apparently buying a vehicle, that kind of thing, and that he's associated very much with physical progress rather than internal or emotional progress. So the Knight of Pentacles would obviously be largely associated with the physical, with the mundane, with earthly associations and earthly journeys and earthly rewards, rather than more emotional or spiritual ones. Ganesha is associated with the root chakra, and that makes a lot of sense to me because he has that sort of fiery energy about him, and sort of that driven energy. It's not like a carnal kind of sexual kind of fire. It's a more instinctual, basic kind of drive or urge that I very much associate with the Knight of Pentacles. The Knight of Pentacles is in no rush. He is happy to stand still and figure out exactly what he's being urged to do, where he's being urged to go before he actually embarks on his journey. He's very much in touch with his root chakra, very much in touch with his sacral chakra, and very, very, very concerned with making sure that he knows where he's going before he goes anywhere. Unlike, say, the Knight of Swords, who sort of leaps before he looks. Ganesha I also associate with the harvest. He is often depicted as either mounted on or dancing beside a mouse or a rat. And there are various different reasons for this, but one association that there might be with this is that the idea of the rat being an obstacle to a good harvest, and that Ganesha is therefore, stamping on the rat and removing that obstacle, ensuring that there is a good harvest. It's not really an association that is largely made, but it's one that I have made strongly with him, with that idea of removing obstacles so that you can reap what you have sown. And yeah, when I initially met him, he was very much associated. It was autumn time, it was the time of the harvest, and I very much associated him with fields of kind of open grass, reaping what you've sown, and that feeling of being handed a key. And if you can access this key within yourself, if you can get past these barriers, then you can start to reap the benefits of what you have been working towards. So the Knight of Pentacles very much taps into this for me. He has sown the seeds. He has been patient. He has waited, and now he's ready to start moving forward and to start reaping those harvests. Sorry about the chainsaw there in the background. Anyway, yeah, I think that pretty much wraps it up. I feel as though this episode has maybe been a little bit more all over the place, because I suppose I'm still very much getting to grips with what Ganesha is to me and how I work with him. I haven't worked with him a huge amount, but he has come to me at very pivotal moments, and he has been important to me at very, even if they've been short and very kind of particular kind of moments in time, it still has always been at pivotal points that I feel as though I need that kickstart, that boost of energy of Ganesha to sort of burst through those doors, I suppose, and really move into the next stage of things. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. Next time around I might actually start doing some requests rather than kind of barreling on with the deities that I wanted to talk about. I might do one request and then do another one that I was going to talk about initially. I'll see how it goes, and I'm going to try to do a little bit of reading this time before I actually get around to do it. It might be a few weeks because I'm heading to Kerry on Saturday. I'm not sure when I'm posting this video. Yeah, I think I'm going to post it on Saturday, so I'm heading to Kerry today, and then yeah, so it might be a few weeks before I post my next episode of Tarot of the Gods, but yeah, do continue to make requests, because I think I will definitely make a strong effort to get to them. And thanks for watching. I've been having some really lovely feedback on this series. I was really excited when I started out on it, and I feel like I'm kind of gradually getting to grips with how I want to do the series and how I want to talk about the cards and all of that, so I'm hoping that it'll actually improve as I go on as well. yeah, who knows, I might even like go back and do more videos on the Morrigan and stuff like that down the line. And yeah, I think this is going to be a series that I keep doing for quite a while, that I'll do quite a lot of. So yeah, thanks again for watching, and I'm really glad that you've been enjoying it and finding it useful, and I'll talk to you again soon.